COVID style. As you guys know, we gotta wait for the link to pop up on Podcast Detroit. Then we're gonna share it with you. I'm Vince Orlando here with our guest Alexis, and what you guys have read. I already know a lot of you already know that Alexis is coming on, and we're expecting to have a nice back and forth. But Alexis is a anti-racism educator, among other things. But while I'm setting this up, do you want to give a little intro to what you do, who you are?
So what I do as a passion is help restore love to the oppressed. And what that means is people who have been oppressed and marginalized are traumatized, and internal trauma that has gone on for generations has different affects and personality dispositions that go along with it. Mm-hmm. So I kind of help people restore and get back to their truly authentic self. In addition, my anti-racism education is focused on white women who acknowledge and understand that systemic racism is a problem and want to do the inner work to become an actively authentic ally.
That's strong. That's strong, and it's necessary in today's racially, I don't want to say racially divided climate. It's
a racially divided climate.
It feels very divisive, but there's some powerful forces that are pulling that division. The reason I wanted to have you on today is, you made a comment in a post that I made about, you said Black people can't be racist because of the power structure. Mm-hmm. And in my definition of race, not mine, Oxford definition of racism was different. But after I talked to you, I started reading different definitions of racism, and there's, in my opinion, there's way too much left open for interpretation, from Oxford to Webster to Wikipedia.
That's a part of the problem.
Yeah, and I feel this is a term that, if anything should be agreed upon, it's what is it? From my opinion, and not my opinion, but what I've always understood it to be. And let me be clear, and I don't know if this happens now in schools, but nobody ever taught us what the term racism was. We understood it when we were taught about segregation and slavery and things like that, but the term racist there was never a class on racism. So that was never, it was just implied what that was. So you could think of it in various different ways, but I've always understood it to be racism itself as an individual act. It's an individual act against another race, usually involves antagonism, in a belief system where one race is superior over the other. And it doesn't take a system for an individual to believe that my race is more superior than this race or that race. So when you said that, you were talking, what I interpreted was systemic racism, which is another thing. But you want to expand on that?
Well, what's an ism, Vince?
Well, there's lots of isms.
Right.
It's a system. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of
exactly. Right. It's a system. So if sexism is a system, ableism is a system. It's this idea that a system will make one thing higher than the other, right? So when I look up ism, it says a distinctive practice, system, or philosophy, typically a political ideology or an artistic movement. So yes, you can be an individual, there are overt racist, right? But racism is a system. And frankly, I don't even like the term racism. I prefer white body supremacism because it puts it on the subject that implemented the system, right? And when I say white body, I'm not talking about like individual white people. I'm talking about the system being designed to prefer or put white bodies on top of other bodies.
Well, then what happens then is we relegate racism to America. And it was definitely popularized. I think it was 1902 when that's the first time that the word racism was ever used in written human history, at least as far back. And it had everything to do with the Atlantic slave trade. What's that?
I don't know the history to that effect that it was 1902, but for me, it starts in 1619.
Well, I'm just talking about the term racism. We're talking about semantics right now. We'll get into all that. But the problem that I have with system, if we were to put racism on a system, it takes away the individual responsibility. And I have a problem with that because everything starts with the individual. So if you can put it on the system, then you can kind of absolve yourself from the responsibility that you perpetuated it. Me, as a white person, I need that sense of responsibility. I need to know that, okay, so I'm not a racist person. Have I been involved in activities that would be considered racist? If I look back now, absolutely. There's jokes that I laughed at. There's activities that I took part in. I didn't know any better, right? There was no male intent behind my actions. It was just what it was, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of that. So I know there's a lot of white guilt, right? So when people don't want to hear the term racism, they don't want to hear white privilege. These things drive into people because they haven't dealt with I think the responsibility that they have to take in that we're part of that system. That doesn't make you a bad person. You were born.
I think that's why they don't, right? Because if I acknowledge that it exists, then I'm wrong if I don't do something about it, right? But if you are willing,
taking that responsibility, you're right? Like you're almost forced into a position of where I have the ability to at least acknowledge. That means I have to do something that's probably going to be bumpy, considering I still have these things around me that perpetuate it, Right.
And then and the thing is, so for me, I understand what you're saying is it takes away the individual responsibility. But if I am participating, if I have found out and I discovered this system is disproportionately affects other people, which means it gives me all of these benefits, right? And because you can't not exist in a world where both are true, meaning that if some people are oppressed, some people are benefited. Those things they go together hand in hand. So it's not like I'm not benefited and they're not oppressed, right? If you got a system where they go above each other, one above the other, then that's just what it is. So if I acknowledge that I want to keep this system the way it is because it will be uncomfortable for me for it to be different, then that's a racist act. That's an individual act of racism. But I don't want to call myself that. And since I don't like calling myself that, I'm just not. And I'm going to tell you wrong and put the blame on you, which is why I like the term white body supremacism, because the system is designed to give white bodies more benefits. It was literally written in laws. These are facts.
I mean, I don't know if it was designed to give white bodies more benefits, but it was definitely designed to keep Black people in a system of indentured slavery. You know what I mean?
But they're in laws. So if it's designed to keep people down, how is the people who are not kept down not more benefited? Right? How do they not have more benefits? I'm saying there's
some other races that have benefited from this also. When the Asians, when they brought them in based on collegiate ability, they benefited in a way that they
got put in internment camps.
Well, I'm talking about this was after the internment camps. I can't remember what the program was called, where they intentionally brought in Asian students. That's why you saw this influx of Asian doctors and scientists in America, because we were slacking. And so there's people that have benefited outside of, it was really, so here's what happened in America.
Benefited in comparison to who though? Are they doing better than, are Asians as equally represented to white people? Do they have the same accent? I understand that. I get what you're saying that and I will say this, Asian and Pacific Islanders are on my list of my own ally journey, right? Because I'm right now working on being a better ally to the LGBTQIA community. Mm-hmm. But Asian and Island Pacificers are getting a lot of flux because of Donald Trump calling it the China virus and the Kung Flu virus, and people don't take the time to differentiate between the Asian culture. right? There's lots of countries. There's Japanese, there's Korean, there's Filipino, there's a lot of countries and people and Chinese, right? But if everybody calls Asians or people with slanted eyes Asians and then assumes they're all from China, then now they're getting disrespected and having racism happen to them too.
Do you see that happening?
Yes.
Because I don't.
I've talked to them.
Well, no, that's why I'm asking you, because I'm not.
No, that is so. Yes, I do see that happening. I can put you in touch with someone to talk to about that.
I mean, because I believe you. So Donald Trump's making America great again. You know what I mean?
It depends on your definition of great.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, because that's some 1940s stuff. You know what I mean? Like that.
That wasn't that long ago.
But what I'm saying is it doesn't exist in the world that I live in, because I don't see it. I'm not talking to you know what I mean? Like, it's not.
You heard that though? Did you hear yourself though? Like, it doesn't exist because I don't see it? That's a privilege.
I'm saying in the world that I live in, like it doesn't embody me. So it's something I wouldn't think of. I wouldn't think of it because, and I think that's the problem with, I know for me, there was a long time where, I don't know that I denied racism, but I didn't think it existed, you know? So, and let me tell the story, because I've always been, I grew up in Detroit till I was about 10 years old. Then I moved over to Roseville about a year and a half, then finished it off in Hazel Park. I got very distinct flavors of what life was, and you know what it could be, what it meant to be a minority, in that environment, and what it meant to be the majority. I also got a feel for what systemic racism was. This is hindsight, right? I didn't know as a kid, but looking back, I could see that once I crossed 8 Mile, all I had to do was dress and act a certain way, and life got a little bit easier. I can navigate poverty a little bit easier than I could some of my black friends. So I moved from Hazel Park, which was predominantly white, a lot of racist tendencies there, and some flat out racist. Not everybody, but there were some flat. There was some
tendency.
Racist tendency is molded into the environment, just kind of melding into the environment without. You can make a joke and not know that it's hurtful, right? Using race, like those are racist tendencies to me. It's not intentionally racist, but people that, if you're in that environment, you're not trying to pick that apart. Everyone's just making those jokes. And we used to do it with each other, different races. We would knock at each other, and there was no hate behind that. Was it right? I don't know that it was right. But we weren't intentionally trying to be hurtful, but it was
that's a part of the problem, and where, like, so racism is the water that America lives in, and a lot of other countries in the globe, on the globe, right? Like, because doing those things, I've made homophobic jokes before because I grew up not even realizing it, right? But once I learned, then my intentions change. I know where my values land. But then now, if I'm asking people to be a better ally, I'm also doing that work to be a better ally, which means I'm educating myself about these issues so that I don't have these blind spots anymore.
You said the key thing, once you learn.
Yes, but I was still saying homophobic stuff, though, right? Like, I was still, and there was in my belief system then, like, I would say, like, think that gay was less than.
You know, when you pick that apart, you start to realize that, right? You don't think. It feels harmless when you're in the middle of those jokes, but because you're not even thinking about it, but it's
because you don't care to think about it. I didn't care because it wasn't like, so here's the thing. It feels harmless because I don't care to consider whether or not I'm being harmful. But when I look at it, obviously I was being harmful.
I had to be taught compassion. And that's what I was, when I went out, so I moved out to LA went to Northern when I moved out to LA, and it's a melting pot. I had never seen a gay person in my life. You know what I mean? I knew they existed, but it was kind of like unicorn, right? Like I was in this little bubble, and I got out there. There's gay people, black people, Asian people, every kind of person you could possibly think of. And so I lived in this environment from where I came from, and I thought, and I mistakenly thought that racism didn't exist. Like, this is after Rodney King and after all of that, and I'm like. It didn't exist in the world that I lived in. Like, we were all, you know, Hollywood, kumbaya, you know what I mean? So when I would hear things on the news, which wasn't as frequent as you hear them now, I'd be like, how? You know, it didn't make sense to me. And I
Let
didn't
me
dig
ask you
beyond that.
this. Did Black actors say that racism didn't exist in Hollywood? Did non-white actors say that racism didn't exist? Or it
It
just
wasn't
wasn't something you were like, it just wasn't something people were talking about?
it wasn't a conversation.
That doesn't mean it didn't exist. And erasure is a big proponent, like
I'm
erasing
saying
the narrative.
perspective.
Yes, that is your perspective, but it
Perspective.
wasn't the world.
Right. I'm not saying that it didn't exist. I'm talking about perspective. I'm talking about individual perspective.
Okay.
So for me, it was hard when I would hear some news reports, and again, not as frequent as it is now. I just I couldn't fathom it, and I didn't.
Did you try to fathom it?
No, I didn't. I didn't try to be compassionate because I had other things, like you were saying. There was other things that were driving me in life, and I wasn't a hateful person, so it didn't. It's not like I intentionally brushed it to the side. It just there were other things driving me, and it didn't feel important because I didn't see it, so I didn't think to pay attention to it. And it wasn't until Obama was elected, and I remember I was out in LA at the time, and I was like, "Well, now racism is definitely dead." You know, that's what I said.
Okay.
Let me finish. Gotta let me finish. So, and it wasn't until Obama where I started to see this deep South component of like this ugly racism that we'd read about in books. I'd never seen that. I'd never seen the power structure of racism. And when he came into office, you started to see this come to the surface, and that's when I was like, "Oh shit, it exists! Like it's real!" Like, and it was a realization for me. I'm in my 20s, you know, and I'm early 30s at this point. And I think I'm very spiritually evolved, not spiritually, but socially evolved, right? That's what I think. And then it took Obama, and then everything that came out against him for me to finally understand. I was like, oh, it's in the system. Like that's when I finally got it. That's when it hit me. But I'm not everybody. You know what I mean? I was in a more open world, more receptive. I was curious about things. But it still took me that long to finally say it's a problem. I'm saying that to say that there's a lot of times people aren't intentionally, they're not intentionally ignoring the fact that it exists because denial is not a choice. Denial is a defense mechanism. It's a defense mechanism, and you know this, and you know from your studies of trauma that the denial is a defense mechanism that predominantly you don't have a choice over. You can intentionally deny things, but sometimes your brain just can't get to a place to where it accepts it because it's been blocked, you know. And I go ahead.
No, I'm listening. I'm also feeling.
That's what the conversation's about, because there's
but I disagree with, I understand that there are some visceral reactions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do agree that there are people who are very reactionary, right? Including people, and if you've been traumatized, until you do the work to understand your subconscious thoughts and all of that. So I'm not saying that that is not an aspect of this. But if I'm telling you about something and I'm a person of color and you just automatically say, no, I'm not, right? You're not listening to understand me. So that's why I don't do the work of convincing people anymore, because I'm tired of begging people to care about me. I do the work of educating people who want to know more.
And I think you're right in doing that, because you can waste a lot of breath on somebody who's not receptive.
But I do expect white allies to do the work of convincing.
I mean, and that's kind of where my place is, because I'm a white ally, because I've been through these things and I've seen it. And a lot of my friends from the old neighborhood, you've been on some of those posts. They're still in the old neighborhood. Shitty. They haven't traveled beyond the old neighborhood.
Now, this is the thing that bothers me a little bit, though. And just because I have been on some of those posts, and some of them are pretty, like, I don't feel safe for their girlfriends. I don't feel safe for the people around them if this is how you react to your feelings.
That makes sense.
And so
no, that makes sense.
It's not even just me. Like, so these are individual character things but these are people who, because of the laws and the way things were designed for generations, right? Like, so the Civil Rights Act was in the 1960s. Martin Luther King would be 91. He could still be alive had he not been murdered when he was 39. So that shit just wasn't that long ago that people were being held back. Even in your childhood, in your neighborhood, you're like, in Hazel Park, you're like, it was like, and racist tendencies and actual racists. So like, you knew actual racists. Yeah. What do you think they do in their jobs?
What do I think they do?
Yeah. Do you think they hiring black people and treating their black employees fairly? Right. So the reason it's in the systems is because people won't deal with their own character and trauma.
So you just took me back to the very beginning of that's why I had a problem with that definition that said it has to stem from a system in order for it to be racist. That's why I have a problem.
Because Vince, it's both and. They can't be separated. It's both and. If the people who are in power in the system have racist beliefs that are subconscious or conscious, right? Like, because there's plenty of conscious racists in the system too. But there's this unconscious racists in there, and then they're not doing the work on themselves. So that existence means that people of color, bodies of culture are oppressed, and then you're justifying that. Now think about it in terms of an abusive relationship, right? If I'm with somebody that's punching me in the face and then telling me I made them do that, or if I would just act right, they wouldn't punch me in the face. Yeah. Like, that's unacceptable. On your post are when they talk about the police brutality, or like, especially some of your friends who have been openly admit to having been in criminal activity and been arrested by the police, and the police roughed them up. But that's a justification, like, oh, but I just conformed and acted right. But the police ain't supposed to be fucking roughing you up.
Yeah, no,
that's not their job.
No, and it's crazy to see some of that stuff on there. Like, somebody will, I can't even drop in. They will find the most minuscule argument that is completely irrelevant to the talk that needs to be had, so that they don't have to have that talk. Yeah, and then they get passionate about it, as if it's intelligently, because they find groups that will merge together and be like, yes,
and then it gives them permission. So this is my problem. Having a difference of opinion does not give you permission to punish the other opinion.
Okay, and you're right, and that's, but when deep down, okay, so here's what happens, and let's take this all back to trauma, because this is what it is for everybody. So when you get hit with a visceral response and you don't know what that trigger is, and you feel you've been pushed into a position to where you have to defend yourself, that's what you do. You defend yourself at all costs. And that's what I see them doing.
That's what some people do.
Well, look, it took me years to not do that.
Right, but you're now a person who doesn't do that. So I'm not about to be like, that's what people do. All people don't do that.
No, but let's be honest and say it's the majority. Like, how many people have worked through their trauma like we have?
Not enough.
I know we can't put a number on it.
Right? Not enough.
I know you're a unicorn out there. You know, sometimes we're talking to people and they don't know what the hell we're talking about, because they'll get hit with something in some, like, a lot of my friends think they're being attacked just because I'm speaking out in a way that's different to what they believe. Right, so they come back and like we're fighting. We're not sparring.
Am I attacking you, or do you feel attacked? So I'll say this: the people on your post, I'm not doing my work when I'm talking to them. Right, like right. Well, what I mean is sometimes in doing my work, I can build up. I'm a human, right? I build up a little resentment.
Yeah.
They want to unload on me. I want to unload on them. Symbiotic relationship, right? So. There's that, because I know I don't, like, in my mind, I don't believe that I can convince you because you're already biased to think I'm ignorant, right? So if you think that, then there's no you start there, you started disrespectfully. You didn't listen to understand. You didn't listen to see my points, ask me questions about them, get me to clarify my position. Like, you didn't do any of that. You just came on attacking and criticizing me.
Yeah.
So we're not having a discussion, but when I'm doing my work and people are triggered and they feel attacked, asking questions like, well, what's making you feel attacked?
Why? There's a powerful.
Why do you feel attacked?
Yeah.
Are you being attacked, or do you feel attacked right now?
And even that, in one of my posts, they would get defensive about, why do you feel like you're being attacked? I don't feel like I'm being attacked. You know what I mean? They would defend the fact that they feel like they're being attacked, because that's the fight or flight that they've been put into. For no reason. I can write these long drawn out posts because no one's ever going to accuse me of lack of context, but I can see what sentence they got off in. And this is where they felt the need to defend themselves. They didn't get to anywhere beyond this sentence, because now the conversation is about, was George Floyd a criminal? That has
Why
nothing to
is
do
that
with anything
relevant?
that's just been posted.
He didn't go to court, right? He was
Yeah,
a suspect,
yeah,
not a
it's
criminal, a
relevant anyway.
suspect, right? And
It,
yeah, it
there's
doesn't
really not even a
justify it.
conversation to be had. Like anyway.
So here's another tool that I will. Are you listening to understand me? Or are you listening to defend your position?
Mm-hmm.
Because with doing that, it is it helps people shift, and I think you described it as bringing their limbic system back on board.
Well, you got to get up to the neocortex. You're
Right.
blocked. You can't get up there.
And so this is just me, since you're an ally, you self-proclaimed ally, you were doing the work of convincing people. Those are some tips, right? So why do you feel attacked? If I don't feel attacked, okay, well, are you listening to understand my position, or are you listening to get me to understand yours? How about we take turns and hear
Yeah.
each other fully out? We'll deal with mine first, and then we'll deal with yours next, right? You set them up, and then people kind of so people's desire to be right kind of takes over. Like, okay, I agreed to do that, so I can't fuck it up, so I'm gonna just do that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's a human thing.
yes, and
It's
you
a very
deal with
human thing. It's not going to excel the human race if that's where we stay, because we got that reptilian brain, right? So the reptilian brain, its entire function is survival. So we have not evolved as humans. We're still young as humans. We have not evolved past the usage of this as our survival mechanism. So when information gets pushed back into back beyond the amygdala, right? And if we've experienced trauma in our lives, depending on the relationship with our caregivers, it will depend on how we're able to process this information. If we get stuck there, you're dumb, right? Literally, you've lost IQ points. It can't get up to the neocortex, which is what makes you human, and it's definitely not getting up to the frontal lobe. So you're stuck. And it took me trauma. It took me trauma that made me evaluate everything that hey, Steve, that made me have to evaluate everything that I knew in my life as right. It was three things, and it's the weirdest things, but I believe that, it's divine intervention. It was the birth of my son, quantum physics, and ketamine. This therapy.
quantum physics is a mother.
Well, all these things merged, and then what ketamine did is I was like, if it weren't for ketamine, I wouldn't be me today, because I was so controlled, and I lived my life in fear, right? So I had to put on this image, this persona. I was always protecting everything, had to control. I was an asshole. It bothers me to look back and say that I allowed some of the things in my life to happen the way that they did, but I can't judge myself for it, because what I realize now in my study of trauma is that I couldn't get to the neocortex. Like, I was stuck in fight or flight. And if I look at even the physicalities, how I would, just from driving, my heel would dig holes into the carpet mat. That's how tense I was all the time. I had no idea. But I look back on it now and I'm like, well, I can't blame myself, because I understand. How do we make people understand that let's get off the blame shit? Let's all just say we've fallen short in our lives, right? And let's look at this objectively. Step outside and look at it. Don't look at it as a white person. Don't look at it as a black. Let's just say this is the system objectively. And then when you start looking at logic, it's kind of hard to deny that.
Do we teach logic in schools?
We don't teach logic. We don't teach racism. We don't teach, there's a lot of things we don't.
So, right, but that's educating people about these things is the way, and training people to have these skills that they don't have is what will change this as a system. So, like, now I'm gonna bring up defunding the police, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they're saying is to take away some of the funding that goes to militarizing the police and put it toward the services that teach these things.
Well, I even broke it down for people because so this is where visceral responses still get me, but I know to check myself. So I'm all behind everything that's happening with the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's about time this is going down and voices are being heard. And then I heard defund the police, and I'm like, well, that's stupid, because that the gut response. And then I had to check that. I had to say, okay, well, if there's got to be something to that. There's smart people behind that. So let me look into that before I go bashing that. You know what I mean? Which I'm not going to do. I might have 5 years ago. So I went in and I started reading about it and got to the core of what this really is. And
hold on, I want to stop you right there though. Like, so what you just said was, I might have 5 years ago just immediately started bashing it.
yeah.
That's the problem.
I
That's what I'm
recognize my
talking
flaws.
about. But no, not you. Like, I'm not talking about you. I'm just using that as an example for other people who are still where you were, in the sense of you see something you don't like, and then for some
Lash
reason
out.
that allows you to bash it.
Yeah, you lash out.
Instead of want to understand it more. So really, even if you think about, if my goal is to defend myself against it, it's all the way over there. So it's not a real life in my face threat.
Right.
So then what I would need to do is develop a strategy if I really wanted to dismantle it. So I need to educate myself about it so I can dismantle it. That's logical thinking. But for some reason, people who haven't, I don't know, shitty ass people, they want to sit there and be like, oh, I don't like it, so I get to punish it. Like, even the dude that was like, this is respectful as I can be. Well, if that's respectful as you can be, you need therapy.
And you know,
well, and that's the thing though, is they do. And when we call them shitty people, we feed into what they've just done.
People who do shitty things. Steve,
Shitty
you want
things.
to say something?
What's that, Steve?
it seems like most people that are knee-jerk reactions like that, instead of intellectuals, they're just reading the headlines and going off of that, and that's it.
I can speak to the chemistry behind this. So we got a space between stimulus and response, right? And Viktor Frankl talks about this a lot in Man's Search for Meaning. So in this space between stimulus and response, there's room to work, right? And as trauma affects people throughout their life, the space gets smaller. I had next to nothing. I was reactionary. I couldn't get past fight or flight because everything was life or death to me. So I reacted that way. And that's why I use myself as an example, because I know what that feels like. And I don't care. I'll take the lumps for being that way if it'll help somebody else to recognize, oh, maybe I act that way too. But I went straight to reaction, and through cognitive process and therapy, I learned to start asking myself the question. First, I had to learn what the emotion was. So I had to start gauging the visceral response. Okay, I feel this now, and this has led to bad places in the past. And then, so I learned to feel that emotion. Then I automatically ask the question, why do you feel it? Defund the police. Why did you immediately say that was stupid? You know what I mean? Why did you feel up in arms against it? So I asked myself, this emotion, is this based on now, or is this ingrained in the past? The past. It had nothing to do with right now. I was by myself, right? So then I got to have a conversation with me and read about it. Go ahead.
So you said trauma in the past since I was born, right?
Yeah.
I have to take this time to talk about epigenetics. And what epigenetics is the study of the epigenome. And what the epigenome is the instruction center for your genome. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it like a computer, your genome is the hardware of the computer, and the epigenome is the programming. Now, and that exists in all of your DNA, right? Mm-hmm. So every cell in your body has the same DNA, but then the epigenome is what gives it instructions for how to play out. Mm-hmm. Now, every epigenome has, and I might be getting these interchanged, but methyl groups and histones, right? Mm-hmm. And so a methyl group is what tells the DNA what type of cell to be. So like it's going to be an eye cell versus a kidney cell, right? And then the histone tells each genome how much, it's like a volume knob. So how much of it to play out. Now, your epigenome is coded with your life's lived experiences. That's mm-hmm. the part that so if you think of your body like a 3D printer, the instructions for what to print go to your epigenome. And then mm-hmm. it tells, so anything you experience in your life. Now, we got that point. Everybody that's alive was present from the time that their grandmother was pregnant with their mother. Mm-hmm. Because women have all their eggs at the time that they developed them. So it's in that belly, that epigenome that was in those eggs that made you was also getting instructions that then and then remember that happened for your grandmother and all the generations back. Mm-hmm. And they have done studies that epigenetic instructions can be passed down for up to 14 generations. So this is not just trauma from one's lived experiences.
Oh,
today.
absolutely not.
People's bodies do arrive here programmed to viscerally react to different cultures and colors and things like that.
Right. Yeah,
And
no,
then if your grandmother was racist and she raised your mama, and then your mama raised you without somebody doing that work to unpack that, you're a racist.
well, and then we can go back to the semantics of that. You're program racist, or are you racist? Does racist take an act?
Both and, Vince. Both and. They're not separate events. If you program racist and you live out your programming, you're a racist.
See, I'll have to think about that. I have to think about that because that's easy. It's easy to call somebody a racist who can't understand for the life of them why they might be racist.
But are
right?
they asking? Right?
Yeah.
Are they trying to understand? Because if you ask, I can help
Not
you
if you're
understand.
defensive. If you're defensive, you're not.
Then here's the thing. Then they just decided that they weren't without evidence.
Well, they don't believe that they are, right? So we talk about denial as not being a choice.
No,
And
you said that. I didn't agree with that.
But it's true though. In drama, it's true. Like people don't
It's a both
intentionally
and.
deny. Well, both and. We can say both and for a lot of things, but so
Spiritually,
people,
everything.
a lot of that. Yeah, I mean, if we want to go the stoic route, we could.
I'm a spiritual being having a black human experience.
Yeah, I'm a spiritual being having a Vince human experience, I guess. Whatever it is, but that's a whole different conversation. See, we can speak in the language of spirituality, and
It's not.
most people aren't going to understand that. It's not even going to register, because if we're talking about spirituality and what we truly are, our true nature, where do these conversations fall into that? Because like Christ said, I'm in this world, but I'm not of it. Right?
I'm glad you asked. So, like, if you think about it, we got source just up here, right? But then we have all these things in between the physical realm and source.
Mm-hmm.
And everything here has its own consciousness and choice. Everything's safe up here, but everything in between, as above, so below. So if this body that we exist in physicality has generational stuff that came through, right? Like in the DNA, the epigenetic instructions, that's my ancestors. In my spiritual practices, I venerate and connect with my ancestors. So their trauma is my trauma because they had to teach me how to survive. And some of those survival instincts are literally coded in my body. So that plays out is that so it's soul, spirit, mind, body. You can't take away what's in the body and just be like, oh, I'm only spirit. I'm a spirit with the body. Yes, that body come with stuff to deal with and unpack too.
And that's the experience, right? That's why we're here.
That's the spiritual experience.
Yeah, that's why we're here. Mm-hmm. To transcend the lower nature, the lower human nature. But
got a question whenever you're ready.
Yep, go ahead, Steve.
Okay. You guys broke off this a few minutes ago, but defunding the police, you had mentioned that you read into it, and I think all three of us are aware of where it's supposed to be, but can one of you field the question, like what are the basics of defunding the police?
So what I got, and not what I got, this is what it is at the source of defunding the police before it became a popular thing. This has been going around in Congress for a while. And, people have been talking about it, but, and there's some people I don't agree with that support it. And there's some very intelligent people that I do agree with so anyway, it's about the police have become big business, right? The drug, the drug industry, there's no way in hell that a married person who's fallen on hard times financially should spend a year in the county jail for driving without a license, right? Like there's all these things that the police have become that's not policing. And what it talks about is defunding that and putting it into programs that boost the community. It doesn't say anything about disbanding the police and making this an anarchical society where everybody's got to fend for themselves. It talks about community policing, bringing people from within each community to help police neighborhoods. But I'm with, I think there's too many cops out there sitting on the road giving people tickets for no reason, ruining their damn lives. People that are already impoverished. and it does target people in the inner city. You know what I mean? And you can't get out of that system once you're in it, and it's not okay. Like that's what when I read about it, I'm like, I'm with that. Like, to fund that part of it shouldn't be. It's to protect and serve. Anything beyond that does not belong.
What is protect and serve, right? Like, so the police's job in my mind is to prevent crime, not punish for crime. And I feel like that got flipped around because I don't feel safe with police. I don't feel safe. If I've been to jail, it ain't fun, and the food is terrible, right? So like,
it is terrible.
I also now volunteer to go into prisons, and I don't eat with them because the food is terrible. But so are the police preventing crime? No, they're monetizing crime. So like, they're not the job of protect and serve is not what they're doing. When we say defund the police, the reason Black people, well, let me not speak for all Black people, but in my opinion, the reason that is necessary is because I don't get the same kind of police you get, right? I don't get that. Like, that's not my experience of policing. That's not, there's no safety there. And then the things that create crime are people's needs not being met that are survival needs.
Right.
I'm not saying that there aren't other things. There's violent crime and stuff like that. And yes, it may be in the public's best interest for people who have a propensity for violence to be separated and reformed, right? Separated and worked with until they deal with that trauma so that they're not acting out in violence. Now, what that looks like as far as integrating them back into society is a different thing. But people who are drug addicts are not criminals, they're addicts. And they should, and here's the thing, even if they do criminal activities while they're addicts, if you help them with their addiction, they no longer do criminal activities, right? So people who are mentally ill are being punished and sent to prison or sent to jail. Right. And then people who are poor go to jail and can't afford to get out. So now I'm not even if I haven't been found guilty and I just got out, got arrested and I'm suspected of a crime, I can't afford bail because of the way that the system of white body supremacism has set it up to have impoverished communities stay together. And all of a sudden that community still look like the same color. I will say this though, that opioid epidemic, it won't be only a Black thing in a minute, because
I never thought it was. I thought that was targeting whites.
Well,
I don't know if it targets anybody, but it was really predominantly.
I'll say this. I can say that because white people have more access to healthcare, and the opioid epidemic was started in healthcare with big pharma pumping drug addiction. So yes, that one, it may not have targeted whites, and that's a good point to make, right? Like, so sometimes even if things aren't intentionally targeting a race, when they disproportionately affect one race over the other, it is still about race.
I'm glad you bring that up, because at the core of all of this so why I believe, number one, I've got a problem with oppression. Anybody that's oppressed, if I have the ability to stand for that person and that group, then I'm going to do it, because I believe in being a good human. You know what I mean? So I've always been compelled, even when I was flawed in my living, I was always pulled towards this thing. I could deny it, drink enough alcohol, and all of a sudden I don't remember my true nature, right? But I've always been pulled towards that. And I think that's all of our true human nature. I think we have that compassion ingrained in us, and then society kind of pulls us in its direction if we allow it. But there's something, I think now is a time more than ever that we have to get behind. It's obvious that Black people have been oppressed in this country. If you look at the history, and yet, if racism was coined in 1902, that obviously has everything to do with the Atlantic slave trade. And what happened, that was because people will make these stupid analogies. Oh, slaves.
I just want to change some of this language. The enslavement of African people. Language matters. So people weren't slaves, people were enslaved.
So when people, and the point I'm making is, people talk about, well, in Egypt, they had slaves, and they'll start talking about, well, they all looked like each other. The thing that was different that happened here is a group was taken from their home, from their continent, to a new continent. They looked completely different than the people that were bringing them here.
And that's where this that was an economic decision because
that's the point.
White indentured slave servants and enslaved people would escape and blend in, and then Native American enslaved people, because this country has a pretty shitty record of keeping its word with people who are not white. Right? Like every treaty they went back on with the Native Americans, that literally people were given 160 acres of land to go murder and commit genocide to settle the West, even though there was a whole population here. But
white people don't keep their word with each other. Just like that. There's loyalty. I'm Sicilian. There's a form of loyalty that I was taught as a kid. And when I think stereotypical white, when I'm thinking outside of, money matters. You know what I mean?
So that brings us back to the point that I was making before I got off on my not Native American tangent, but I made that point, was that Africans who were brought here to be enslaved didn't know the land. So even when they escaped, it was more difficult for them. And that was the purpose of enslavement, because there were free African people here before enslavement. And then somebody who was an individual racist, and then people who, as you call them, racist sympathizers, got together and saw this economic activity going on and was like, wait a minute, now we got to convince these other people that African enslaved people are not, are beasts of burden and not people.
Yep. So something different happened here. Something different happened in America that had never happened before. And that's when the coin racism was formed. Something different. This was different than people enslaving their own people. This was a new thing.
Yeah, well, I feel like it was like an efficiency, right? An upgrade. So
capitalism. This was capitalism.
But know this, that the place that the white people who stole America, they were escaping their own oppression and their own barbaric systems from the British. So like they were here, they were traumatized people, and we talked about that whole cycle of then projecting that onto other people.
Hurt people.
And not to mention in Resma Menachem Book, My Grandmother's Hands, talks about vicarious trauma, right? So like if you was to see somebody be murdered, if that's not your norm, you ain't sleeping well that night. Right. And a few nights, that image is going to be in your head. There was a movie where I watched a murder on a movie, and the dude like slammed the head in the door, and they was real graphic. You can see little brain bits and all that. I still am traumatized by seeing that scene. I was like, oh, I'll never watch the show again. Right. Like
Two Smoking Barrels, wasn't it?
But you know that problem?
I think it was, I don't know. My ex used to be into some kind of comic show, something. I don't know. He had a bald head.
I have 2 points to make real quick.
Okay.
Actually, to help along with your story, Alexis. First of all, the protect and serve thing. I know I'm going pretty far back, but that is not their job, and that is according to the Supreme Court ruling from like 2008 that the police do not exist to protect and serve. Just so you know. So that's not true anymore. Second of all, the first U.S. police department that I know of was established like right after 1776, and its sole purpose was to catch and retrieve runaway slaves.
Yes. So Vince, to answer your question, how does this tie back to spirituality? We know how much intention literally matters, even in quantum physics too.
Absolutely.
It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is still carrying out the intention that it was imbued with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what it was designed to do. And to give people a sense of security and to give other people a sense of fear and oppression and subjugation.
Yeah.
Those were the intentions of the runaway slave patrol. If you get out of line, we're going to run away and we're going to come get you and bring you back to your place.
Mm-hmm.
That was what the badge looked damn near the same. It's doing what it was exactly intended to do. When African enslaved people were written into the Constitution as 3/5 of a man, the fact that the descendants of African enslaved people and other people who have migrated who happen to also have black skin, the system is doing exactly what it was intended to do. This was the intention in that Constitution. All men are created free, but hey, wait a minute, you not a man, and women, you my property.
Yeah, they were.
So like it's doing what it's, if you haven't had to have your rights legislated to you after a fight, then that's the privilege, right? The system is doing what it was designed to do, and it's still doing it today.
And we haven't rewritten it as we were told to do.
Well, it's going to be, it has to be, or there's going to be, there's a revolution brewing, and I would like to see it a political revolution, but whatever it winds up being, it's going to be, because people won't take this. But I want to go back to trauma, because we got, 8 minutes left. And at the end of in epigenetics, the beauty of epigenetics, I was with all those cats out in London for the Conference of Consciousness and Human Evolution, and Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden, all those cats, and it's true. Everything about that is accurate. But the beauty of epigenetics is you can alter your DNA, like
if you choose to, and
if you choose
conscious intention to it.
Conscious intention. So we talk about conscious intention and how this relates to spirituality. There's so much trauma, generational trauma. You just said it. You know it. I'm aware of it. We've lived it.
And
we've worked on it.
Bred for comfort.
What's that?
Like, it's not all just trauma. White people are bred for comfort too.
I think,
I
grew up poor and white, so I don't know. Because beyond racism, there's classism. So
yes.
So if we take away this race card, that whatever the power,
but why were you? Wait
a
minute. Why did you mention you were Sicilian? There was a time when Sicilians weren't white.
Oh, I know. I know. Right, we were able to acclimate eventually.
But here's the thing. I'm not. So then, from that perspective, Sicilians don't have as much time being bred for comfort as people who were always considered white.
That's true. Yeah, but even Irish they're white. You know what I mean?
But they were not always white. White had stages, right? There was permission. So here's the thing. As soon as white people start sympathizing too much with black people, they be non-white, so Irish, Sicilian, you start sympathizing too much with black people. Hey, wait a minute. Hey, listen, y'all. We'll stop fucking with you if you come on over to the white side. We'll give you, your kids can be safe if you come on over to the white side. You won't have to deal with this bullshit.
So who are these white
All you got to do, huh?
Who are these white imperialists?
The people in the government. Our founding fathers. They were from Britain. Yeah, and colonization happened over the globe, right? So this is not so yes, it was improved here, but then in South Africa, when they instituted apartheid, before they did that, they went around and studied different racist systems around the world and took the best practices. So we didn't have the worst racism. I believe South Africa did, in my opinion, because they literally perfected it. Said, oh, what y'all doing? What y'all doing? What y'all doing?
They took it a step beyond.
But I do want to say this. I want to bring it back to spirituality just a little bit. It can change, in epigenetics, it could change with conscious intention, but the world gets manifested from the subconscious mind. So until we go in there and the species deal with them subconscious beliefs, this will be a cycle that repeats itself, because you have to work in your conscious mind to get it to your subconscious mind. And if people aren't willing to do that, then revolution is going, it will and won't be televised.
We call, if we then have worked beyond, because I know I'm on the other side of trauma. I still have my visceral responses. I'm able to quash them pretty much immediately now. It's not to say I can't fall off the deep end tomorrow, but I'm pretty confident that I won't. But I'm still so close. I'm still so close to those responses that I know what it feels like, and I can understand people. And now that I understand the mechanisms of the brain, I can allow for the space on my Facebook feed, for example, to let some of this stuff that my visceral response is, I'm better with words and facts. And I will come back in here and dismantle everything you said and make you feel stupid for saying it. What benefit does that have to the higher good? It has none.
Well, that's an asshole response too, right?
It is. It's
okay. So so not that I don't do it. This is not coming down on you, because I said, I sometimes will come on your post to unload some stuff, which is projection, and an asshole response.
Right.
But that, helping that person metabolize that trauma is what is necessary. Like, so it's not just not reacting yourself. It's helping them get to the place where they're making that connection, not making them feel stupid for saying something.
That's what I'm saying. So you got to allow the space for some.
No, I don't have to.
We're still viscerally attached to. I feel like I should allow some space for that to happen, because trauma's about feeling safe. That subconscious part of your brain that's still very much in fight or flight. How do you make that feel safe? How do those neural pathways open up? Through cognitive processing therapy, we had to do different things. I was in a place where I was able to make those choices and do that. Now they have EMDR.
That's what defunding the police is trying to get to the communities that have been traumatized by the police. And frankly, the police need it too, because they're doing traumatic shit and they are not helping heal. They're not getting the healing that they need. And they're the agents of racism and violence, and they need healing too, because they happen to be human beings. That's
what I wanted to come back to on trauma. So if you think about this for a second, if racism is ingrained in your DNA as a white person in America, or anybody, but as a white person predominantly in America, it's ingrained in your DNA, but you don't know that it's there. You don't want to hear that it's there. You're going to protect yourself against that feeling at any cost. That's trauma. So the fight or flight response is going to kick in. And that's what I see, because a lot of people aren't bad people. They're not assholes. They say asshole things in protection of themselves when they're not even being attacked. You know what I mean? And we have to find
our opinions, right? People are people.
Right.
But and you might not be a bad person, but if you're doing a lot of bad shit, it's perfectly understandable why people call you a bad person.
If you're doing a lot of bad shit,
if you're doing it and giving but you don't know it's bad, and then you give yourself permission and call it good, then
you need to be held accountable for your actions.
Yes.
You need to be held accountable for your actions.
Yeah. But what does that accountability look like? Right? Like, so the thing that is necessary to heal this is to have these difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but first, people got to realize they are not allowed to punish the other.
That's what I'm getting at. Because what do you get? More punishment. You've justified every negative feeling they've ever had. You've allowed them to validate it.
But me expressing my feelings is not a punishment. If you feel attacked and me attacking you is two different things.
No, that's different. That's different.
Right. But I can be angry and not be attacking you. Right, but your anger permits you, not you, but I'm thinking of the type of people we're talking about we can't convince. Yeah. Those people's anger permits them to attack me. And the problem that I have with that is the system protects them.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Like, then in my experience, it supports and validates their anger, and we have stand your ground laws that allow them to murder me, but then do not have that same effect if I was to murder them. So like, when you talk about like what am I supposed to do? This is not a black problem. It's a white problem. What are y'all gonna do?
Well, I hope that's what we're seeing right now. You know, I hope that's what we're seeing is the white people that can talk to the other white people and say, no, I see things this way. There's going to be a lot of bickering en route. You know, I don't see that stopping tomorrow, but we could go on for hours with this stuff, and we'll have to do it again.
My body can't handle going on for hours, but I can't do it in another hour.
Yeah,
my black body, I am angry. Right. I'm angry at the notion that, and then, so like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna just rant a little bit, because then when I'm upset and I'm doing all of this, people want to tell me, oh, I got to make people feel comfortable for them to listen. Fuck your comfort. And when I'm teaching people who want to be educated, I care about their comfort. I want them to have an ally-gasm, right? A breakthrough where they understand, and all of a sudden they want to impact the world and create pleasure for everybody. But when you're doing things that are offensive to me, and then I try to tell you that they're offensive, and then you want to gaslight me, and then now I got to make you comfortable to get you to understand, who the fuck do you think you are that your comfort is more important than mine?
Well, I don't know that they think.
What you think you are.
No, I don't know that they think. Gaslighting, gaslighting is a thing now. That's a real big thing, but I think our time's up. But one thing we were saying in our group, one thing you can do as a white person right now, because you are in America and there is white privilege, and that doesn't mean that you didn't work hard for what you have. I know people take that deep. No, it just means there's a system that's been set up but what you can do is step out and take your lumps. You know what I mean? Like, to have you be angry in my vicinity because of some shit that has happened to you, if that's all I have to do to help say, I recognize that. I understand. I didn't live it, but I understand it. I don't understand your anger. I can, I can try to, but I haven't lived it. Go ahead, unload that shit. If that's compared to what black people had to go through to get even to this point today, that ain't shit. That's nothing. Step out and take some lumps, So
I agree, but it's hard for me to be like, why do the lumps have to be there? Right?
Well,
like, why?
History. History. You know what I mean? Like, we're all traumatized. Like, I hope we can all agree on that. Like, your trauma is different than my trauma, than Steve's trauma. Even Trump, who's sitting on top of this thing, he's been traumatized,
That's true. And we have to wrap. I just saw the notification, but I just want to say this about privilege. White privilege isn't the only privilege, right? I have privilege as a cisgender woman. There is privilege over people who are have able bodies to people who are disabled.
Okay.
There's levels of privilege even in white masculinity. If I'm a macho person and I'm more, the broski, that kind of what, what I'm saying, then you're going to have more privilege over someone who might have just might be an introvert and things like that. So privilege exists on many levels. You don't have to feel so attacked when people say you have white privilege.
That's extremely important, and that's a good way to close it like that. So we got to do this again,
Yes.
You come in, mix it up, and keep it. We'll keep it real. We'll keep it real. Let the chips fall where they may. Hopefully this spawn some debate. But all right, Dave, we'll get out.
I got a program coming up the second week of September. If you found any value in this and you want to become an actively authentic ally, I promise to be way more compassionate with you and your unpacking of all that bias than I was on this podcast.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't do it. At Ask Alexis, people got to learn, and shame doesn't teach them. So askalexis111@gmail.com. You can follow me at Ask Alexis on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm doing right now a 3-day ally challenge. I invite you to participate, where I'm giving actual lessons on how to step your ally game up while still being authentic to who you are.
Thank you, Alexis. This was beneficial. We'll do it again, and I'll see you tomorrow, right?
Yes, okay. Tomorrow. Thank
you.
All
right. Have a good night. Keep your questions coming. We'll respond to all of them. Thank you.